early glimpse into this anthology, which was stunning, and I was really amazed by the epic scope of it, and as well as the intimacy. There's a real granular fingertip feel with the difficulties and the disruptions and the small joys and surprises of this pandemic time, but then also the larger arc of how we tell stories during uncertainty, how we can work through grief through writing, and as a community of writers, the kinds of questions and inquiries we can ask that fuel us, and perhaps our questions working through our creative practices. So I was very edified by reading this anthology. It was such an honor to be in conversation for the past couple of weeks with these contributors. So that's a little bit about me, and I'm very pleased to be part of this discussion today. I think we'll all remember this time. 2020 is certainly a year we'll never forget, so might as well bring some love and light and hold a good frequency with it and see how it can really spark and ignite more conversations and deeper integrations with our practice. So I would like to introduce our fine panel today. For Writing the Virus, the anthology, today we have the wonderful and talented Edie Meidav, called an American original. Edie is the author of Kingdom of the Young, novels including Lola, California, and Crawl Space, and she co-edited the anthology Strange Attractors. Is that right? Strange Attractors?
Yeah.
And she's on the permanent faculty with UMass Amherst in the MFA program. We have Uche Nduka, who was born in Nigeria to a Christian family, raised bilingual in Igbo and English. He earned a BA from the University of Nigeria and MFA from Long Island University in Brooklyn. He left Nigeria in 1994 and settled in Germany after winning a fellowship from the Goethe Institute. He lived in Germany and Holland for the next decade and immigrated to the United States in 2007. Nduka is the author of various novels, one of which won the Association of Nigerian Authors Poetry Prize, and a variety of accolades, and also is a cross-genre writer with a collection of prose, perhaps most recently with Belltime Letters, published in 2000. Forthcoming book titled Facing You will be published in September in 2020 by City Lights. And at the helm, we have Andrea Scrima, the StatORec editor-in-chief. Andrea Scrima studied fine arts at the School of Visual Arts in New York, and an institute which I will allow her to share the correct pronunciation of, in Berlin, Germany, where she lives and works currently. German translation of her first book, A Lesser Day, was published in 2018. And she writes literary criticism for the Brooklyn Rail, Music and Literature, among other fine publications. She publishes a monthly column for Three Quarks Daily, and is currently working on her third book. Her second book, a novel titled Like Lips, Like Skins, is due to come out in a German edition in the fall of 2021. So that is our fine panel. And I would like very quickly a hello from everyone that is dialing in and logging in and beaming in from all over the world. If you could just say a quick hello, unmute really quickly. Why don't we start with, I'll lead here, so because otherwise it might be a real jump on. Or actually, let's take a look. Yeah, we have about 17. Actually, you know what? Our numbers keep growing, so we're gonna save that hello. At first we had about 7 people, but we've just doubled, so that's a good thing. So why don't we dive right into our dynamic discussion today? I'd like for Edie to ring the bell and start our panel with a reading from your selection. And if you can give us the arc of it, where are you located in the anthology? Because we have this anthology, Writing the Virus, is architected in a very specific way.
No, thank you so much. Okay, and then also, I would love if later we have everyone off video, on video, but I guess for our current moment, I guess we'll be hidden, or some of us will be. First of all, thank you, Andrea, and thank you fellow Uche, Margot. Thank you for showing up. Thank you all for showing up when you're all zoomed out. And one of our big questions is, how do we find community? What's the opportunity? And to speak quickly, Andrea and David created an incredible division in this anthology, and I'm in the section that's called To COVID with Love, but there's so many other, I mean, I would actually love if Andrea spoke to that in her comments, the way that the divisions were made. So I'm just gonna, I think I'm gonna read for about 5 minutes. My experience on Zoom calls is that less is more, and the conversation with you all will be what is interesting. So yeah, I'm just gonna start. I was resisting Roland Barthes' another a lover's discourse, which, because of the pandemic, it seemed really useful and important to use work that had ruptures in it, because we were in the kind of global rupture we haven't seen in our collective memory. So here, the section headings come from Roland Barthes. Okay, to circumscribe. Here, in the time of the Great Panic, people retreated to their bunkers. The people of the past come forward. Yesterday, we found a path at an odd road, named as if after a bad blues song, like Coffinell Cove. I'm going there to find my beloved. But this was true. At the mouth of the trail, a cheery older man approached, unheeding and wanting to hand us a card about a book he wrote. He no longer cared for construction. He cared for spreading his name out on the waters. His wife looked on skeptically, as if often she had seen him needing to have his writing recognized. He was of an older generation and equivalently skeptical about death. While this East Coast forest was so splendid in its understanding of how death could cohabit with life, branches fell to climb upward. A bark prince sat on his pillow inside one hollow trunk and regarded us with some idealism from inside a moss-covered pelt. I am beginning to cohabit with this bow, no longer so new. We are no longer rank amateurs, we are known to each other. Microbes merge. The father of my children is rightly skeptical about who comes in and out of the house. The house represents the heart. Is it wrong that I wish more light to enter it than what I knew before? Okay, second section. I think I'm going to read just 2 more sections. To be engulfed. Take this as our first premise. We begin with fear. To be hauled out of whatever is safe and comfortable is what you encounter starting this screed. Also, let us consider the premise of the womb. For our purposes here, my first memory of a mother carrying me down a narrow corridor toward a gust of cold air. Maybe there was a chain hanging by the door, first being meant to protect those inside, but who cares about any of that when memory itself is always that narrow corridor? It reinscribes itself in the brain backward from a premise. And where does second memory live? Where does anyone place it? How much does not get remembered? Early truths, the needs of others, whether tyrant or mothers, can squash. Safety is to be found away in the unblue light of outside exile. Okay, I'm going to just skip way ahead. And this is from the very end. Dedication. Everyone keeps asking, what does it mean to write in a time like this? Your students, friends, you ask this of yourself. Adam in the garden gave names to the garden. In the garden of chaos, is it important to gather names? You provide for your family through 2 means. Packages from the megaboss lie outside, toasting in the sun or freezing. The new animals of the parsonage seem to understand this time as a confusion of inside and outside. And their interiors end up on blankets inside cages when they go to the vets, where you sit in a car while the semi-blanketed nurse lifts up gates and then comes back and smears the virus, which you are taught to think of as glitter, glitter spreading everywhere, all over your door and the interior of your car and your credit card. The rain pours down. She is a hero, as are the cats, who just get shots to protect both of them from the penchant of one not to take the edict of being an indoor cat and instead to roam outside. Outside is where danger lives. The nearby students, quarantined, have a habit of blithely petting the cat. They don't want to stop. Disappointing, one of them says. They like the outside penetrating in. Of course, everyone wants to be loved, to be heard, to read, speak. While your class during this time feels like a front line of intimacy, everything matters, you tell students. This is why you dedicate yourself to writing. The one album you listen to over and over is by Ofoy, Behind the Wall of Sleep. You play it as you and your friends write together in areas around the world. You want to read one another and hide together and soon emerge. For this promise of literature we sing. Thanks.
I love the rhythms of that, Edie, and you take us inside, outside. I love, you mentioned the house as the heart, and also the danger being outside. For you, as you're writing, and the anthology is writing the virus, that idea of present tense, is there a heightened sense of inside and outside? Has it changed for you, evolved for you, or do you want to be inside more? Is there a delineation between before the pandemic began or was named? And has that influenced the way you write? Do you feel more urgently like you need to write right now? Or do you feel like you have just more space in your home? Has that sense changed for you, the interior versus exterior, or perhaps the versus has lost a little bit?
Yeah, I love that. The versus has lost a little bit. I think this moment of all of us coming awake was a rupture, a useful rupture. I had had some version of it in my personal life the year before. I felt like a pupa with no butterfly, with no chrysalis, and just kind of flung open in the world, onto the world. And then on top of that, you know, I mean, my mother died, many moves, divorce, etc., all in 1 year before. And so I felt as if the epigenetic hyper vigilant part of my brain was very prepared for the virus. And I entered a kind of fugue, like a kind of ancestral trauma that replicated itself in my fugue state, like shopping for canned beans in the early days where I felt like I was out of time. And I just really kind of hope for myself and actually for all of us that we can preserve this feeling of being, some of us have not had the privilege of ever being asleep, and some of us feel startled awake in new ways. But just, I really think the writing that will come and comes as in this anthology from this time will be, my hope is that it will be a new kind of writing, in that we can no longer pretend to our separateness. And I think that when you say the versus is no longer there, I kind of feel each day is kind of a mountain, and we don't know what bad news is going to come. We don't know anything. But so, like, can we all stay awake forevermore? That would be my fairy tale hope.
And it's interesting when you write about the naming as well, the naming in the garden, and that kind of biblical sense of order. And yet, so when we're inside, but inside more, and so perhaps the idea of danger being outside, safety being inside is a little bit flipped and inverted too, especially if people are dealing with insomnia or perhaps discord within a marriage or relationship, or simply the boredom or the mundane repetitions from day to day. So it's interesting to see how writers are grappling with those questions of how we can wake those senses up, and if they're a little bit numb inside, or that we have to, I don't know, stretch ourselves and more strenuously ask ourselves these questions, how we write through things. But that was a beautiful reading. Thank you.
Thanks.
And now let's move to Uche, who again has done a lot of beautiful cross-genre writing. But in this anthology in particular, we have some just startling and luminous poetry. So we'd love to hear from you, Uche.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me to participate in this. And right away, I want to make some correction about my biography. I've never written a novel.
Oh. Oh, a collection of, oh, it looks like a collection of prose. Okay.
Yeah, no, there's just a collection of prose, you know, brief essays, kind of.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Okay.
And then the rest is poetry,
Excellent.
right? You know, the other books, yes. So I must also, first of all, thank Andrea Scrima for practically instigating the writing that, you know, emerged from me during this wild time, you know, very confusing period. Because when she sent me an email, just telling me to just send any work, something like that. I was like, I don't know what to say, because at that point I was almost numb, you know, with the situation. I couldn't leave my apartment in New York. I couldn't practically do anything, really. So I think her telling me to do something helped me a lot psychologically too, in terms of trying to navigate and to process this confusing period. And starting with that, the poems I sent to her, you wouldn't believe it, but suddenly I have a new volume of poetry. See, so it's no longer 4 poems. Now it's about 65 poems. And perhaps without her telling me to look, send something, the book wouldn't have emerged. You know, so I'm very, very grateful for her for that. And even the voice that emerged in the work itself, lots of my readers, friends have been telling me, well, that's not quite how you write, you know. I said, is that? They said, no, that's not your style. I said, I'm very, very happy to hear that. Because part of what I aspire to as an artist is to surprise myself. It's not to repeat what I've done. There's no need to write, you know, for me to write the poems I've written before. You know? So when this new voice came out from this, I really think is a big deal for me. And then for lots of readers, perhaps who couldn't also access my work earlier, it seems it opened up, you know, more audience for my work. And that's something I feel every artist also looks forward to. You want a bigger audience and a more understanding audience, you know, not only those who support you all the time, but those who at times can also confuse you. You know, artistry for me is not only about mastery. It's simply about putting yourself in very unfamiliar situations and risking to fall on your face. You know? It's not only about success. I don't see the work of a writer as just being about being a success. You know, I see my work more as an adventure, trying to deal with the environment where I find myself, the particular country I lived in, you know, right down to intimate relationships. All of that emerge in whatever chooses to come through me. You know? And in this particular instance, my response, I think, that came through in the poems I sent, right from the first one, seems to have been to what I noticed, you know, right going on. It's the fact, in lots of ways, it's almost like what I call documentary poetry this time. You know, yes, you know, it's not about the flourish of images, but something documentary, which I find necessary. Sometimes you can actually have to react to a situation honestly, directly, bluntly, with candor. You know, there's no need of beating around the bush, so to say. You know, there's always this old idea of poetry that, you know, it must be imagistic, it must be symbolic, and so on. I said, yeah, that's until something hits you square between the eyes. Suddenly the image is vanished. You want to just really yell, practically. So in this instance, I would say that, speaking of which, by the way, that's the title of the series. They are a direct response, what I would call a visceral response, which I think we need in order to have a reckoning, particularly with America. The issue of racism in America. It's not something you just sweep under the carpet and start talking about post-racial period, After all, there have been a Black American president and all that. I don't think that's just lying, There is still, racism is still pervasive in American society. And I think I just found myself, I didn't even know that was going to happen, but I found myself now confronting it head on. And I think I will keep confronting it head on, henceforth. So let me read the first poem of the series. They messed their faces multiple times. They broke their eyeglasses, 10th ride of the mounted units. This is not just about prosecution. These protesters are fighting against domination by a bunch of jerks. There won't be peace if there is no justice. They fund the military, the paramilitary, more than the health department. They bail out corporate crooks. They peddle untested drugs for the pandemic. They whip millions of citizens with unemployment, devastation of civil rights. They look for ways to neutralize justified anger. They kick their legs, kick their ankles, deck them, threw gas at them. You know what's going on. Stop asking. Agent provocateurs, arsonists, anarchists are trending. This is not a Mad Max movie. And that's the first poem. The second, birds flew into protesters whose hands were still in the air. What about those discriminatory practices against Blacks? Cell phone videos as truth tellers. The school term is steaming the city. She takes off down the block, makes for the road with a backpack, says she's done with quarantine, lockdown. Therefore, urges giving the police the benefit of doubt. There's no dialogue to be had with a hate monger. How long will it take to realize the evil of hateful disinformation? Rogue cops throwing gasoline on fire. Seems it's too late to reach across the aisle. They purposely spew conspiracy theories for political gain. They are not being delusional when they manipulate voters, when they throw voters into political sewer. Consequences of the crime spree of government, the corruptions of the unequal transfer of wealth, that shop talk of trees rising stocks, bail fees, soldiers firing at speeding cars, a demagogue's domestic terrorism, disastrous industry survey, rushed condolence call, counterattack, nothing to write home about in the transition of power. Burnt churches, defaced billboards, violated shrines, graveyards, shut up synagogues, schools, offices, cinemas, nightclubs. Stay up to date with a broken clock. And the next is number 3. Footprints say this country was built by Black hands. The Washington Monument was built by Africans. This skyline says the White House was built by Black people. This nation cannot survive the normalization of the police killing of citizens of color. Hot take on obelisks, full of hatred, full of carnage. Will they attempt to burn down history too? Some of their monuments celebrate lynchings. Nothing to see here, but not jobs in glass boxes in the land of the free. Is a sin to be Black. I don't trust these cops taking knees with protesters. Don't drink the bleach. They call you a spick, as if that is who you are. They call you nigger, as if that is your name. The gaslighting of these enforcers of white supremacy is getting to me right about now. Is this your favorite period? Drama? Another hour to record the atrocities of the police in public spaces, whose job was it to operate the elevator after each killing. Politicians tell protesters to calm down. What a ruse. Lawsuits fly from one state to another. They yell about chalets, credible threats. A shootout lampoons the G7. They claim spray cans foment unrest. A knee pressed into the neck of a man. A TV reporter on duty shot by police. At night, absentee ballot issues, demonized mail carriers. A president inside a bunker muttering about thugs, ominous weapons, getting even, surrounded by sycophants, toadies, inflaming the national trauma. No quarter for anti-Black racists. Zero tolerance for lynchers. And the last, closer to where the wind rose, bragged, devoured, coitus interruptus. It's tiring to always rebuild the houses of my exasperation, the pressure, the calamity waiting to be spoken through throne bottles, protests, tear gas, beatings, the scrutiny of the elixir of exile. I take a knee, I burn sage, pepper spray, riot shields, police cordon. The trial begins each day, stomping on the roofs of vehicles, barricades fall, gas masks appear, police cars set on fire, agitations over the violent death of another Black man. Police lines betray another afternoon. Nasty clashes over racial profiling, over justice denied. This is taking an unexpected turn. How cool are the secret service officers in Mufti? Curfews. They are shooting smoke canisters into crowds again. Property is more important than people, they say. Blocked traffic, rubber bullets. Shit is about to really go down. They are ready to crack some skulls. Why are they provoking protesters? Why are they pissing people off? Bloodstains, bodies, brains. Thank you. Thank you.
Wow, Uche, that was so cinematic and so clear and self-possessed. That moved from almost reportage to incantatory and back and forth. And I love how you begin the series with the breaking of eyeglasses in a way. So it's almost thrusting us into this new way of seeing. There's so much of damage and pain, but yet you burn sage, the speaker is burning sage in these poems and verse. So there's almost this cauterizing of a wound. So there's this healing, but through pain. Can you talk about in your writing how you navigate between power and powerlessness? I think that word power came up once or twice, yes. but it feels yet so hopeful and so moving forward. And I love also, speaking of which as well, has a kind of a wink and a nod, but a sort of let's do this together. Let's kind of interpret this together. But can you talk through the power and powerlessness and the way you think about that and negotiate that in your poems?
Yeah, I think that this society in particular, American society, has a way of trying to make everyone feel powerless, no matter their color, whether they are white or blue or yellow, or whatever. There's this trick to make you feel you don't matter. No matter what you do, nothing will really change. And I think I refuse to buy that. You know, I refuse. I see myself as someone who's proactive. I see myself as someone with agency, you know, and I see myself as someone with political freedom. America can't cow me. Look at the character they call their president. It's ridiculous. And they want me to take them seriously, you know. And then they want me to keep quiet, you know, so that I won't be called the angry black man. To hell with that. I'm angry. I'm furious. And there's no reason why I shouldn't be, you know. So I don't really see myself as powerless. So in terms of, the reportage there was intentional. I simply want that to be recorded in history, that this happened. And I want it to be recorded that this happened under the watch of someone that Americans elected as their leader, who people even call the leader of the world, the free world. The man himself is not free. How can you elect somebody who is not free to be the leader of the free world? I can't just, you know, imagine it. Freedom comes from the inside. If you find somebody who is psychologically damaged as the president of America, and you really call him a leader, I feel really insulted. I feel embarrassed that this is who Americans elected. And of course, I'm an American. So I take part of that blame. But in terms of what I think about it, I think things have to change. If we all, this so-called peace we all crave, it will never happen until justice is done in this country, racism is wiped out, hunger is wiped out, because as we are speaking now, there are food lines in America, a country as rich as America. People are homeless in America. I just can't believe what is going on. That's the thing, you see, there is this incredulity that tends to nudge me from time to time. I'm like, am I sleeping or am I awake? You know, is this the America that we all aspire towards? Because personally, I believe America is a work in progress. You know, it's never finished practically, you know. Just like we as human beings are works in progress, even until the day we die. But still, there seems to be a certain tendency to just assume that because oppression has become a default mode in America, that it should be accepted. You should give up, you know, why bother? You know, people wouldn't care. Really? Really? People wouldn't care? And then because people wouldn't care, they expect me not to care. So coming back directly to the issue of power, I think that practically every human being has power. It just left to them to discover the power in themselves and start buying the false stories from politicians, gurus, priests, imams, telling them they have no power. Every goddamn human being in the planet has power. Let me stop there for the time being.
Well, we feel very empowered by your work. So thank you so much. And I didn't realize that origin story as well of the series from basically the catalyst from Andrea, which is wonderful to bring you into now this discussion as the co-editor in chief or the editor of StatORec. So Andrea, please read us from you have a beautiful contribution in this, obviously, as the co-editor, have touched every micron of the anthology, but would you please read some of your introduction?
I was going to read from my piece, actually, and not the introduction, if that's okay with you.
Yeah,
I have the Word document here. I'm going to read about half of it. It's about 8 minutes. I'm going to read just a section. I guess I'll say a couple of words before I start. I had been in Florence for a month just before the virus broke out, basically. I was there in February, and I had this bizarre, I mean, all of our experiences have been bizarre. My bizarre experience was really, I came back via Amsterdam, and then I arrived back in Berlin. And that was just about the moment that the really bad things started happening in Bergamo, you know, in all of Lombardy. the first really frightening spikes where all of the intensive care units were filled within weeks and people were dying and dying and dying. And we were watching this in horror. And it was just it was one of those surreal experiences where everything was just okay, you know, and I come back and it's very hard to come to terms with. It's almost like somebody blew up a place that you just left or something like that. And I was able to, I'd been working on my second book in Florence and looking at a lot of art, and I came back and I was able to sustain that for about another month. And then I ran out. I couldn't do it anymore. And then of course I started working directly from what was happening and began writing about the virus and writing about the statistics and writing about this change in perception that we were all globally wrapped up in, because obviously everybody was, it was this really extraordinary experience of everybody on the planet basically going through the same things simultaneously. And so I wrote my essay, and then I sent it to the TLS because an editor there had published something of mine on the Berlin Wall like last year, but I didn't hear back from her. And I only learned many, many months later that she had come down with COVID herself and was sick for a very, very long time. And I realized that if this essay was going to mean anything to anybody, I had to get it out right away. And I decided to just put it up on our own site on StatORec. And that was kind of how it all began. And David Winner, who's here today, we'll talk to later. Hello, David. He's my co-editor. And I put this up and then I said, well, what do you think if we try to do an issue? And he said, well, I don't really know, you know, but then he was moved to write a piece, and we started asking the writers that we knew and liked to write a piece. And pretty soon we were sort of tumbling into this thing, and it just snowballed. It became more and more. I started stalking writers that I really, really like on Facebook and asking them to, you know, write me this thing. And everybody said yes. Almost nobody said no. And you ask somebody for a 20-page essay and they're like, when do you need it? You know, and it would be done in 3 weeks' time. I think that everybody kind of responded to the urgency and the immediacy of this time. And it was a really moving experience. I have to say it was crazy. I mean, within 7 months, we published 31 pieces, and it was an average of 2 per week. And this was with intense editing, sometimes really weeks of corresponding back and forth and asking people to expand their pieces or having conversations with them at least about it. And yeah, I think I only realized in retrospect that it was my coping mechanism. I didn't know that when it was happening. It was my way of staying sane. I really didn't know that. I thought this is all way too much, and I didn't sign up for this, and this is much bigger than I wanted it to be, but I'll get back to my own book soon. And I realized months later, no, this is exactly what I need to be doing right now. So that's a bit of the background information. I'll read a section from my essay. The title of it is Corona Report. 3 days before Italy's first recorded death from COVID-19, the UEFA Champions League soccer match between Bergamo and Valencia, which Bergamo's mayor Giorgio Gori would later identify as the decisive biological bomb, took place on February 19th at the San Siro Stadium in Milan. 44,000 fans crowded together to watch a game that had been heavily promoted as the largest in Atalanta's history, holding up signs that read, "Insieme da sempre, insieme per sempre," always together, together forever, and cheering wildly while thousands more gathered with friends and family to watch the game on TV. Although the first domestic cases had already been confirmed, the coronavirus was still seen as a Chinese epidemic. Unaware of the danger, a third of Bergamo's population hopped in their cars and chartered buses, clogging the roads and causing 3-hour traffic jams on a stretch of highway that normally took 40 minutes. When Atalanta won, fans were delirious. Jubilant, they flooded the streets and squares of Milan and crowded into the bars and restaurants of their hometowns to celebrate, hugging and singing and drinking well into the night and the next morning, and turning virtually all of Lombardy into an epicenter of the pandemic as 2,500 disappointed Spanish fans who traveled to Milan for the game flew home, carrying the virus with them. In the press, Atalanta's managing director defended soccer's importance to the country's morale. Today's results prove us right, he said, following Bergamo's 4-1 victory, and our city deserves it. Our boys will go down in history for society and for all of Italy. By mid-March, when this turned out to be true, albeit not for the reasons the team's manager had envisaged, I realized just how close I'd come to contagion. The day a third of Bergamo's population flocked to the San Siro Stadium was the day I left Florence to travel to Greci, the village my grandfather Luigi emigrated from nearly 120 years ago, and that he never returned to. That his mother, Maria Luisa, never returned to, that none of his 9 Bronx-born children, including my father, had ever seen, none of their children had ever seen. Had I boarded the Frecciargento in Bologna the following morning, the train heading south from Milan, I wouldn't have sat next to Fabio during the 4.5-hour trip, but quite possibly a hungover soccer fan who'd spent the night reveling and was now headed home, snoring in his seat, in which case it's likely that I would have caught the virus and passed it on to Rita and Pino, my hosts, and would have passed it on to their son Luigi, who drives the town's ambulance, passed it on to Aldo and the rest of the staff at the Comuna, from where it would have spread to Greci's overwhelmingly elderly population. 3 weeks later, just as Bergamo counted the highest number of COVID-19 deaths in the country, a third of the Spanish soccer team tested positive for the virus, and the number of dead in Valencia had reached more than 3,000. Bayern München was still planning to play Union Berlin until the Bundesliga, having come under heavy criticism, finally called off the match. In the case of the Atalanta game, signs of the impending pandemic had appeared well ahead of the event. On the Regionale I took from Florence to catch the Frecciargento in Bologna in the early morning of February 19th, Trenitalia broadcast a solemn announcement that it was taking the danger seriously and was implementing all necessary precautions. But when I got up to use the toilet, I was puzzled to find the soap dispenser empty. The first cases had already emerged, but the coronavirus was still seen as something essentially Chinese. Italy had already suspended flights to and from China at the end of January, and in Florence, I saw Western tourists trying not to shrink from the remaining groups of Asians crowding the Uffizi, the rest of the city's museums and churches. The prevailing perception was that the virus was something intrinsically alien. People feared that the nearby city of Prato and its huge Chinese immigrant population would become a hotbed of contagion. As it turned out, those first few weeks of February were the calm before the storm, a period of incubation. Although the precise starting point of local virus transmission, in other words, Italians infecting Italians, remains unclear, there were ample warning signs that a mass event like the Bergamo versus Valencia match should have been canceled. While xenophobia flared up under the threat of the coronavirus, anti-Chinese sentiment had been brewing for some time. As Chinese immigrant manufacturers successively replaced a once thriving Italian textile industry, a region that had traditionally voted left now swung sharply right. Successful for generations, family-run artisanal businesses in Tuscany, Umbria, Marche, and Emilia-Romagna went bankrupt as Chinese sweatshops began manufacturing cheap copies of their designs. When Italy's recent trade agreement with China resulted in a total export deficit of 20 billion euros, populists jumped in to decry the foreign invasion. But then, when the northern countries didn't come quickly enough to Italy's aid, the arrival of the virus brought about a sharp reversal, replacing anger at aggressive Chinese business tactics with a new wave of anti-EU rhetoric. In mid-March, I was struck by the image of Pope Francis walking through the empty streets of Rome, flanked by security guards. It was a pilgrimage to pray to the Salus Populi Romani situated in the Cappella Paolina in Santa Maria Maggiore, a Marian icon attributed to Saint Luke, brought to Rome by Saint Helena, and said to have saved the city's people from the plague during the papacy of Gregory I. Francis then walked to San Marcello on Via del Corso to offer flowers and pray to a wooden crucifixion, accredited with having stopped a resurgence of the plague in the 16th century. 2 weeks later, in the presence of these two holy artifacts of the Catholic Church, which had been brought to the Vatican for this purpose, Francis gave his Urbi et Orbi blessings in a rainy and deserted St. Peter's Square, reminding the city and the world that we hadn't been shaken awake by wars or injustice, nor had we listened to the cry of the poor or of our ailing planet. It was 2 weeks before Easter, and I suddenly recalled that my son and I had been in Rome at this very time the year before, when the Notre Dame Cathedral caught fire and the images of its flaming roof and the smoke darkening the Parisian sky and the startling footage of its spire collapsing branded themselves in our minds like a terrible omen. That's it. I'm done.
That was so beautiful, Andrea. You have a global aperture that is evident in your writing. When you reached out to the writers for this anthology, you and David, how much of that was at play? You talked about this being a pandemic of a global experience, in some ways uniting us and giving us a through line from country to country, culture to culture in some regards, and then also presenting some points of differentiation and difference. But how much of that global moment did you want to capture in this anthology?
Well, I don't think we really thought about it. It was kind of a thing that grew organically on its own. We never thought that it would be this big. We never thought about doing an anthology until we already had a 300-page book on our hands, basically. We started out, I mean, I'm based in Berlin. David and also our publisher, John Reed, are based in New York. And we tend to be Berlin and Brooklyn based in that sense. I don't really see us as this huge global project. We're very small. We're actually very tiny. It's just us. You know, we do everything. We do all the back end work. We do the social media. And so we were reaching out to people that we knew, but we didn't move outside of our circles. We approached people that we didn't know also, and we had some very good experiences with that. But it's not, I wouldn't think of it as a global anthology. No. I think that would have to be done in a very different way. You'd need a number of editors who could competently speak about literature in their respective countries. So.
And when you did reach out, making these connections, either to folks that were familiar to you, writers you had worked with, what were some of the patterns that you found that surprised you? I mean, certainly everybody's going through different kinds of emotions and work, family, etc. But what were some of the real moments of unification among the 31, or is it 31 writers?
It's 31 writers and 30 pieces. One of the pieces is a collaboration between two writers. I guess what I mean, David might say very different things when we talk together later, but I think what probably struck me the most was just the emotion that everybody was going through. And so we were connecting in very intense ways. I mean, I had people saying very emotional writing emails, but very emotional things, and everybody really working with an incredible sense of urgency. This was the thing that was the most striking to me, was a sense of being very glad to have a chance to respond to this moment now, and not for some book that's going to come out in a year, but we're going to put this up now. Really, these things were written and they went online. They were very carefully edited, but they went online more or less right away. And this is not how we usually work. I mean, we usually like to leave a period of time in between let a piece sit, think about it, look at it again. I mean, this is how I edit my own work also. I really don't like to write something and publish it 5 minutes later. It's not really the way that any of us actually normally work, but I think this entire timeline really really kind of telescoped or became microscopic. I don't really know what word to use for that, but everything changed. You know, the sense of timing changed, the sense of urgency changed, and you think of the kind of cascading experiences that we've been subjected to since the first arrival of the virus, and not even knowing if you touched the railing in your building, if you were then going to touch the zipper of your jacket, and not knowing if one little particle of this thing could kill you, or we knew nothing in the beginning, and it was this gradual learning process. And then, of course, watching the progression of this disease around the world, and the way in which the virus, and let's say in America in particular, the viral political climate became sort of part of the same thing, where you have this feeling like these changes that are taking place. And when it finally exploded in these Black Lives Matters protests that were extraordinarily disciplined and from sort of imbued with a message of collective love and tolerance. I think if you look at the spectrum of everything that the United States went through, let's say in the last 6 months, and add on top of that the administration and the election and all of these things, we've been through the ringer, as my mother would have said. We've really been through it. And so I think that almost all of the writers were really responding very, very quickly, and wrote very quickly also. We're very, very glad just to have an outlet for what they were going through now, because I think many people were having a hard time figuring out. I mean, nobody seemed to be able to just go on with their work as usual during this time. So anyway.
Yeah, and there's certainly that sense of urgency that comes through a number of the pieces, and also that the gift of being able to share and to be heard, almost like a message in a bottle, or something very primal, the hand on the cave wall. I was here, this is our art, this is the way we're expressing ourselves in this moment. And I do want to open this up for questions from this wonderful Zoom collective moment. So if you have some questions to the folks,
I'd like to introduce David Winner, actually. If you are not run off to the kitchen to make a snack in the meantime. There you are. Hi. Yeah, this is my co-editor.
Hi.
Partner in crime. This is the person. I mean, I think probably more than 1,000 emails went between us in the last half year. Yeah. So it's been quite a process. You talk.
Well, really, I'm more of a writer, not much of an editor. And so, but one amazing thing that happened is there are writers who, are in the Times and the New Yorker, and Andrea engaged them in very sort of vibrant dialogues about their work. And I thought they would, for StatORec, this thing that, people have not heard of, would they sort of run away and say, no, I was in the New Yorker last week. No, but people really engage with her, and the conversations that she had with writers. And I too, to a degree, became conversations about this political moment and this, tense, chaotic, crazy time. And so there's the volume of the anthology, but then there's all these conversations that came about as the result of the creating of the anthology, which could almost be an anthology of its own.
Yeah, we'll make more sense of it, I suppose, after some time has passed, when we look back and look at what this has been and wonder what it all means. Yeah.
And did you have, as you were moving through the weekly postings, you mentioned 2 or 3 posts per week, at what point did you say, this is what we should really make this into a book with a cover, and let's call it? And then at that point also, when do you stop? Just share a little bit about that process, because that's really fascinating from the editorial perspective of this ongoing. And as we know, here in the United States, it feels in many ways more precarious and uncertain than it did in March. Yeah. So it's an ongoing and devolving situation. But from the editor's perspective, for Andrea and David, when did you make that call to both say, yes, let's do an anthology, and then also, okay, this is when we have to close it off at?
Yeah. Well, I asked David and he said, no, no way. And then, I mean, it was a bit of a process, but it's really, I mean, I had spent a couple of months on this, and then I was starting to think, I have to get back to my book. I was thinking in April that I would do it until June the most. And then by then I thought by the end of August, and it just kept going on and on and on. And we just realized at some point we had to ride the whole thing out until the end. And I'm not entirely sure when we knew we were going to do an anthology, but we began taking it serious. I think maybe the first step was really just, I put everything together into a Word document, and we looked at it and we suddenly realized, wow, you know, these things are going to continue to be relevant. This is a book. And it was a bit scary at first, because the risk working with material like this that is so of the moment is that in 2 or 3 months' time, it might seem dated. This is one very big worry of ours. Maybe David, you could talk a bit about that.
Yeah, well, I just want to thank John Raymer, the editor of Outpost 19, who published this book. It was an incredible stroke of fortune for us, is that he had saved a place in his fall list for something coming up at this crazy time, and he accepted this and worked incredibly hard with us. So we you know, it's one thing to have collected these essays together and to decide to do an anthology, to get a publisher when, you know, someone publishing it in, you know, what's the normal schedule, like late 21. Right. You know, the world's gonna be completely different in late 2021. The fact that he was able to be willing and able to put this out so quickly was huge for us.
Yeah, it was incredible. He was basically saying, I left a slot open in my fall program for something just like this. I mean, not knowing that this was what he was waiting for, but it all just kind of came together. I mean, we had spoken to 1 or 2 other presses, but it became really, really clear quickly that the timeline, we would have to do this very quickly to retain any relevance for the book. Yeah. And when that opportunity presented itself, we just jumped on it. It was the right thing to do.
And there were certain decisions along the way that at some point we were thinking of, are we going to put all of these, publish all of the essays that have been in StatORec about this time, or pick some of them? And we decided, I think it's a really wise decision to publish absolutely all of them, because they all give a different images and this kind of tone poem really about these times. And
and a kaleidoscopic view of just the moment and the infinity of possibilities within it, even though so many people are in a stationary way, you know, not having traveled or continuing to work, sometimes working extra, double the hours depending on the situation. So do the panelists have any questions for each other? You brought something so wonderfully unique to your reading today. So for Uche, Edie, and Andrea, would you like to ask each other anything? Surely you've collaborated a lot in the lead up to the anthology and the work and seeing it live on StatORec. But if there's anything, I think it's really fun when panelists get that chance to go horizontal and speak to each other.
Yeah, it's a nice thing. I mean, Edie, go ahead.
I'm just repressing my teacherly urge and community making urge to have everyone on the Zoom call sort of speak to one another, because, you know, like, for example, I see Jim Hicks, editor of the Massachusetts Review, or, you know, I mean, Carol Frederick, who runs Art Oh My, you know, International Arts Residency, you know, Deborah Emery. I mean, I would love if you all just, if I could just seize a moment and have everyone just introduce themselves, because you all are kind of, I can just see amazing people. Just like maybe one word, you know, one sentence about who you are, where you are, maybe one, you know, one thing about the pandemic, and then we could maybe have a more cross-lateral conversation, if that's okay. I know that's to do it. Okay. So, but Mark, why don't you just hand off to the next person? You know, just name the person next to your thing. But Jim, Carpenter, do you want to start? You're muted, however.
Just muted.
Should I say
Okay.
something then?
No, I'm good. I'm good. I have trouble clearing my throat in one sentence, but what I was thinking about through this entire presentation was how this changes the actual experience of writing.
Yeah.
You know, it's no longer, you know, the word urgency has come up in terms of this work, but writing itself is the least urgent thing in my life right now. And missing my grandchildren is right up at the top, you know, and the virus and the pandemic colors absolutely everything in my life, you know, from the logistics of a medical appointment. And, you know, I'm not ever thinking about how that informs my writing. I'm just not.
Okay, so Jim, that is such a beautiful introduction. He's in Pennsylvania. Barb Fishkin, do you want to introduce yourself? And then call out the next person.
Hello, I'm here. I wrote about my son who is 33 and has non-speaking autism. And he was under lockdown when everyone else was let out in New York State. And I was a big fan of lockdown when we needed it, but I thought that when other people were out, that the governor, who, you know, he's of my party, I'm a good Democrat, and I loved both Mario and I like a lot about Andrew, but I thought that what he did was he focused on the people who had the least voice and were the weakest and could not speak for themselves, because many of these people in group homes, my son included, do not speak. So he said, oh, we'll just keep them literally locked up under what I thought was illegal house arrest. And that was very frustrating because we had spent a lot of time not seeing our son. We're not helicopter parents. Our younger son, who was a New York City school teacher, would tell you that, that perhaps he could have used a little more parenting growing up. But we do like to see our son, our older son, who has autism, does many other things. He's a farmer, he's a surfer, he's a hockey player sometimes. We see him, we live near him, we live a half an hour away from him, so we could see him, but we had not been able to see him for longer than ever. And then we were only allowed to see him on the doorstep. This is a topic, it's funny because this is kind of the only, as far as I can tell, disability story that's being told, but there are many. And we're looking at disability as a human rights issue in our family. And it was very much so during the pandemic. But this is a story that's kind of gone under the wire too. I mean, everybody talks about Donald Trump making fun of the reporter who is disabled, but nobody's really talking about the big picture about how people who have disabilities have not had a voice in the pandemic. And that was really what I wanted to say. And also as a mother, I was grieving, and Danny is fine. He was here this week for a speech therapy session. We will do a very small Thanksgiving with 5 of us. And even now, though, this is important. We're getting letters from the agency that runs this group home not to take anybody home for Thanksgiving. And people are basically ignoring it because other people are doing small groups. And, you know, I didn't know what to do about it. Dan has antibodies. We don't know what that means. He had COVID. I guess I left out, I buried the lead, newspaper reporter though I was. He had COVID, he has antibodies. It is a saga. But now we're being told, we're being kind of made to feel guilty for taking anybody out of the group home for a day or two with their families. And it's all very confusing to me because I support mask wearing, I support distancing, I support all of this, but I also want my son to be treated the same way other people are and given a little bit of freedom. So there you go.
Do you want to call on, let's see, Carol Frederick?
Larry Bensky.
Hi, Edie. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for this effort. I look forward to reading more of it. Maybe I have what amounts to a question. I think one of the big emotions and experiences has been one of precariousness and not knowing, just not knowing. And that makes me think of, I know many people who aren't writers, but are literary or in publishing who say they can't even read. Not reading seems to be common. So to imagine writing, I wonder if it's hard to find a voice when everything is so uncertain and unclear. And thanks for the plug for Writers Oh My Edie. I am the host of the Writers Residency at Art Oh My, and urge you all to discover us. And we've done some online readings and hope to build our digital program going forward. We actually had a residency. It was very different. People could not sit at the same table. They couldn't go to town, and I was there to just listen a bit to what their experiences were. Thank you all so much for this effort.
Margot, you should just take over just calling on people.
Yes, let's, this is fun.
Larry Bensky.
Larry.
Hello,
Oh, yeah.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Thank you all, everyone, for participating. This is very interesting. I want to respond to what somebody said about the pressure of deadlines in an evolving situation where you're writing fiction, but the situation is almost beyond imagination. And it's a big challenge. That makes it even more impressive when somebody has foreseen what we're going through and has written about it recently with contemporary allusions. And I wanted to call your attention to this book that I've been reading. It's by an author some of you may be familiar with, a South African author named Lauren Bukes, B-E-U-K-E-S, and it's called Afterland. And the conceit in the book is that a pandemic has been loosed upon the planet, and it has killed almost everybody on the planet. There are only something like 2 million people left, 1 million in the United States and 1 million everywhere else. And from those people, a group of controllers has emerged, all of whom are women. And men have been systematically exterminated except for a few who are in a breeding pool. Their sperm is being saved and DNA analysis is being done to see who can breed and who can produce virus-resistant offspring. Meanwhile, it's all women who run everything, including the camps where these men are imprisoned, and some are selected for reproduction. There are contemporary references in it to pandemics, although the book came out in September and had to have been finished. It's published by Little Brown, had to have been finished, as you all know, sometime much earlier this year, before the virus even was detected and was known in the United States and worldwide. And there's all kinds of things in it about how people were blaming the Chinese and others were blaming others. It's a magnificent science fiction oriented imagining of the situation we're in right now. And I very much appreciated reading it. Again, her name is Lauren Bukes, B-E-U-K-E-S, and the book is called Afterland. Thank you.
Thanks, Larry. And how about Marcia?
Oh, hi. Hi, everybody. I was fortunate enough to be in a workshop with Edie at formerly called Squaw Valley, a community of writers. I teach for the Writing Institute at Sarah Lawrence. I teach fiction and memoir, and the reason I'm here is two things. One that Edie mentioned is the challenge with creating community via Zoom and network and people, you know, you can't look eye to eye, and so much falls upon the teacher, and it's, which isn't, I don't regret that, but it's how you help with people develop relationships with each other, because writers need each other so much. And then the other one is just, you know, the question of time period, you know, pre-COVID and post-COVID. Is COVID the new BC? You know, how, when people are writing books, they're asking, do I need to, you know, do I date stamp COVID into my book or not? And how is that being handled? And I think it will sort itself out, but I still think it's something to contemplate.
Absolutely. Excellent point. Thank you so much for sharing that perspective.
Thank you.
Just
Thanks for doing this on a Sunday.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to, Margot, if I could just briefly introduce Joan Juliet Buck, who is also one of our authors. Say hi. It's really good to see you. Yeah, she's also in the anthology. She's actually one of the writers I stalked, as I mentioned. Joan was doing an amazing Corona diary on Facebook, and I just swooped in and asked her if I could just sort of take what we could use, and she let me do what I wanted. It was a very, very quick thing. It was it's an amazing piece. I hope some of you actually do take the time to read the anthology. We have some extraordinary work in it, but it's nice to see Barbara and Joan both here. Joe
Right.
Salvatore, I think, is also here. He's Joe, are you still? Yes, okay. Yeah, he wrote that he's in a one bedroom apartment in Queens with his two little kids and his wife, and they're both teachers, so they homeschool and their kids are homeschooling, and so it's tough times right now. But Joe Salvatore is actually the last the last piece that we published in the Corona issue online, and it was quite a finale, I'd have to say. So that's all I wanted to put in.
Yeah, thank you, Andrea. It's really
Hey, Jeff.
great to be part of this event with everybody. Last time I was the last writing the virus event, my daughter, who's 6, sort of would not leave me alone and was constantly on the screen. So I'm trying to be safe right now, keep my screen closed. So apologies for any rudeness, nothing intended like that.
It's okay.
I want to say how happy I was to be stalked by Andrea, because this whole weirdness of writing, I've always written a diary, but I was so alone and so scared and so falling through an infinity of space and days that were all the same, that I just knew I needed to mark them. What happened today? What happened today? Just make a circle around each day and put everything that had happened in it. And it was very important for me to keep my sanity. And then what I found was that it was connecting with people. And I was connecting with people I knew, people I didn't know. That's why you put it on Facebook. But I needed the community desperately. I needed to be sharing the stuff that's not the grand stuff. It's the stuff about, you know, why did I put Swiss cheese in the gruel this morning? And how strange that was. And it's not good to do your exercises after that. Just the minutiae of life. And the man that I love, with whom I was reunited after 54 years, was back in London and completely out of, I mean, obviously not out of reach because of electronics, but there seemed to be no way that he would ever get to America because Europeans were forbidden to arrive in America, and I wasn't going to go to London and get completely locked up because I had to have eye operations. I mean, it was just this drama, and I put everything into the diary every night and just typing modestly on this thing. My eyes were completely fogged, but I could see the phone. And so just writing on the phone every single night without, is it going to sell? Will my agent like it? Is this going to make me famous? Is this going to sell? Just, I need to talk to people. And I've never written from such plain need. And it's also the regularity of it, just every single night. So these two things, the need and the regularity, taught me about modesty and humility and regularity. And so doing this brought me so much. And also I feel now like I'm much more connected, like I'm seeing all these faces I don't know, except for Andrea, who I know a teeny bit. And I've seen more in a rectangle than I ever have in real life. But I've always thought that writing was something that you did alone, that it was the mountain that you climbed all alone, and your feet were covered in blood and you were alone and you might be crowned with glory at the top or just completely forgotten. And that was the chance. I never saw it as an ongoing process of connecting with other human beings. And that's what the Facebook diary taught me. It's what Andrea stalking me taught me. It's what everything. We have created a whole. And with the book that Andrea and StatORec put together, this whole kind of exists even more. And I think that we've all kind of stumbled onto new ways of expressing ourselves. End of speech.
Thank you, Joan. It sounds like that this has opened up a door in many ways for you. And I hope that, I mean, for me personally, it has as well, that something brand new to my process. It was just, I feel like we live in a culture where we can easily find someone's, random thoughts on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, and yet still we're so hungry to go deeper, for more context, and for, to be able to join the dots, as it were, and invest in each other in these ways. And that's, I think, a beautiful gift of the StatORec community now. Is I want to see what's the next project that's going to come forward as well. So I'd like to just, we'll continue introducing ourselves in our community building way. And we're all probably, I think we have maybe just a few folks left that have not said hello. So how about Jim Hicks? You said hello and a quick introduction.
Yeah. Hello, I'm Jim Hicks. I am in the woods not too far north of where Edie probably is, north of Amherst in Leverett. I edit the Massachusetts Review, as Edie said. And no, it's been wonderful to hear you all and to think about, I mean, lots of themes. I think Joan was incredible and in summing up some of the stuff that I was thinking about as well. And I mean, how often is it that writers are conscious of, in some sense, needing to be immediate and direct, but at the same time be archivists? I mean, that you're writing for the moment and also forever, right? And maybe that's always what we're doing, but I don't know. Most of my writing is in two forms that don't usually get recognized as writing at all. That is editing and translating. So, so it's the idea that it is in fact not a solitary activity is something that's always part of my life. The other thing I was going to mention is that I think you should just keep doing events like this where the people in the anthology connect with each other as well. Because the similar thing that I got involved in mainly as a translator was a project called Decameron 2020. And it was getting writers to write short 5-minute stories, getting actors to read them and then filming them and putting them on YouTube. And the guy who was sort of at the beginning of it, an Italian writer named Edie Meidav, in introducing it said, "This is the way we break the siege." And that's how it's felt for me, and it throughout the whole process, and that's how it's felt for me listening to you all today. So.
That's beautiful. I liked that. That's a great series. Tommy Orange, I think, did a really interesting piece about becoming a runner during the pandemic. But it is such a gift. And again, we'll probably remember select times during this crazy year that will continue on, until the vaccine. But these are the moments that I think give us an opportunity to coalesce some of the other, days that might not have anything particularly memorable about them. But that's what I look forward to as well. And just hearing what you are all working through just gives me so much to think about as well, from the editing perspective, from the writing perspective. But I wanted to, let's see, why don't we PT Pony? It's a very evocative, evocative name.
My name is Paul, Paul Seidman. I've known Andrea since we were 15. I have that distinction and honor. I am coming from Wabanaki territory, specifically from Maine. And part of what I've been aware of is how for some people, this is the second most significant pandemic, with, white supremacy being, that violence being the first. And I'm networked with some folks who are Penobscot who are currently sort of reaching out in a variety of ways, social media and otherwise, to collect traditional medicines, because there's been a COVID outbreak in particular in the last 2 or 3 weeks on Wabanaki land. So, it's just part of the story, right? As has been mentioned by a couple of folks, with regard to disability and racism. So yeah, just all these layers of distress and trauma, and it's a lot, as everybody has been saying.
Thank you, Paul. And can we say hello to Juliana?
Yeah.
I think you're muted. I see the microphone.
You're muted.
There. I am not a writer. I know both Edie and Andrea. Hi. I am a reader. I am a photographer and a digital artist, and I find writing fascinating. So I'm very appreciative of this chance to listen in a little bit. Yeah. I mean, just listening to how people are processing what is going on is interesting. Yeah, I don't really have anything more to say about it that is profound, but yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing this space and time with us, and for reading.
Yeah, non-stop reading.
Important energy.
Yeah.
And Shelby, looks like is the square. I know everyone will have a different arrangement, but the square immediately to the right is Shelby. You want to say hello? Or perhaps as a microphone is being unmuted to Carol.
Oh, I've said hello.
Oh, okay, great.
Thank you.
All right, well, if that is everyone, it's now rounding up to about 3:30, but if there's anything else that the panelists would like to ask of each other, if the wonderful faces that I see before me, if you'd like to share anything else or ask one of the writers or the editors of this really important anthology, we'd love to hear from you.
I wanted to say hello to Edie, for one. Hi, Edie. Where are you? You still on?
I'm on.
I'm Mike Healy, and for several years I was, and still am, a member of Edie's late mother's workshop, which we continued, mostly by Zoom. In fact, right now, completely by Zoom. But it's working very well, and we've taken on, Edie, you might be interested in this, we've taken on a member from Tennessee that's joined our group, a guy named John Trent. But I've been busy. I've actually helped conduct a graduate class, speaking to a graduate class at San Jose State University, where my book that was published a couple of years ago is required reading. And that's the BART history book, Edie. It's called BART, The Dramatic History of the Bay Area Rapid Transit System. And also doing some writing and otherwise hunkered down, but 3 days a week I do play tennis. So that, that's the only thing I do. Anyway, I've enjoyed the discussion very much. Enjoyed hearing everybody. It's very interesting and illuminating. Thank you for having me on, and thank you for inviting me, Edie.
Thanks for being here. Yeah, so I know I love this kind of homecoming reunion feeling of this particular, Juliana in Berlin, Andrea, all these. But shall we talk? Is there to go back to Margot's question? Is there anything anyone wants to ask? Anyone of the panelists want to ask? What questions remain?
I'll ask for any and all of the contributors, what has surprised you most, as you've made your way through this year?
It kind of goes to what Joan was saying. For me, it's like that hunger to connect, even as we're doing it through this really impersonal medium, the coldness of the square made warm. That's fascinating.
It's I think at this particular moment, the thing that's surprising me and horrifying me, and I'd love to know what everyone else thinks of this. Quick history, my beloved is now with me here in upstate New York, but the landmarks, my birthday, his birthday, Thanksgiving, which isn't going to be Thanksgiving, the landmarks are kind of falling, like the stations, the things by which we measure time are, we're going through them. And it seems like the winter stretches out into an infinity of nothing ahead of us. I'm just, oh my fucking Christ. I look at the sky and I think, okay, it's easy to go, heart of gold, balls of steel. We can do this, pay attention to the minutia and the rest will take care of itself. And Trump is still destroying everything and he's breaking it. Oh God, don't think about that. Think about what's ahead of you. More? I have to go on doing this more? That's my real question. Are you all going through oh my God, how many more months of this? How can I do it?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, I think I love that, the fierceness that you bring to that. And I so agree. It's like that comes right from my brain. I couldn't agree more. It's dark at 4:20. There's a kind of dematerialization and the boundarylessness of things and certain markers of my life, even with the semester and teaching, there's a bit of an amorphousness. So those fixed boundaries aren't quite there. Which does open up space for imagination and, connecting in new ways. But of course, we're only, sharing like from this kind of space. So I like giving, when I do connect with friends or family in that way, just trying to surprise myself in the process and have new kinds of conversations with people I know and love. But I think for writing, that's what, like that, doing something like that. Because it's memorable.
I think the question on a lot of writers' minds is, okay, am I on? I've been talking to a lot of writers about this. I too had to stop working on a novel when the pandemic hit, and I was very grateful to Andrea that she gave me a place to write something else. But as I see that there's going to be another wave, and maybe another wave after that, and maybe another wave after that, what do we do about the books we left behind? And are they relevant? Which is a word I don't like to use that much, but I was writing a book that had absolutely nothing to do about COVID, the pandemic, Donald Trump, any of that, and stopped it. And now I wonder if I have to in some way put them in. I've been talking to other writers who say, no, not at all, let them stand on their own. But I was wondering if there are any other thoughts on that.
Carry on.
Margot, I'm aware, I have so much to say on that, but I'm aware we're at time, so it's your call on that. My quick answer would be, it feels as if, you know, there's no need for literature to only be one thing. That's my hunch about this time. So whether or not it's an operating manual or a document or an addition to the archive or kind of call, a manifesto or a call to social change, or you know, or an escape. You know, your prior novels will be a delicious escape bearing no mark of the incumbent or pseudo incumbent.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just my take.
Yeah.
Uche, what do you think of that?
Uche, can
Yeah.
you hear?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What would be your answer? I'm curious what your answer to Barbara would be.
Oh, well, I would say, well, if you can, be faithful to the book in terms of don't impurify it simply because of, you know, the moment. And there is always this, I don't know how to call them, leaders of opinion who always feel writers, by all means, must be what? Relevant, right? You must be committed. I hate those words, you know. I mean, relevance is an everyday thing, you know. So anywhere the work pulls you to, if it is something abstract, let the abstraction rule. If it is a rant, let it be a rant. And don't be apologetic for it. That's it. So just listen to the book and the direction the book is going, and follow the book. That's how I write myself. You know, that's what I can say about it at the moment. Yes.
Yay.
Well, that I think is a perfect way to bring this all together. So thank you so much to Uche, to Edie, to Andrea, to David, all of the contributors of Writing the Virus anthology. I just dropped the link again if you don't have a copy or you haven't ordered a copy yet through Outpost 19. My tremendous honor to be part of this with you, this ongoing story, and I look forward to all of the next iterations, the next installments as we continue moving through. Stay in touch. I'll follow you all in the various the various ways of breadcrumb trails that we try to get out of this forest together. But thank you again to everyone. Andrea, would you like to say anything to close as our captain of the ship here?
Just a thank you to everybody for coming. It's funny how we can create a sort of an intimate space where we talk to each other and we're all staring at screens. I still can't get over it somehow that we've adapted to this kind of new mode. But I mean, we often say, wouldn't it be so much nicer if we were all together in person? But this isn't so bad. You know, we've created something here. We're all, you know, different parts of I'm in Germany, and some of you are in California, I think. Yeah, it I don't know, it still boggles my mind a little bit, but thank you all so much for being here. It means a lot in these times, it really does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Andrea, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
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 Bye.